Ever find yourself just like completely zoning out and thinking like, how did we get here? From just some ordinary primate to like the absolute rulers of this planet. I mean, what's the real deal behind that insane climb to the top?
Oh man, it is a wild ride when you really think about it.
Mm.
And well, that's exactly the deep dive we're taking today. We're cracking open Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. This book, it really gets you thinking.
Yeah, for sure. It's not just like your typical history lesson,
Yeah,
dates and battles and all that. Harari, he brings this fresh perspective looking at like the big shifts, those pivotal moments, the things that actually catapulted us from, well, basically just another animal to the top dog. And that's our mission today. It's to really unpack those core transformations, those game changers that made us, well, us.
and Harari is like the perfect guide for this journey. He's this Israeli historian, super sharp guy, and he specializes in this whole sweep of human history, how we evolved. And he's got this amazing way of weaving together all these different fields like history, science, philosophy, even sociology. It's not just about what happened, but like why it all went down the way it did.
Right, exactly. So we're going to follow that path from those early days, as just another ape species, all the way to becoming this force to be reckoned with. And we're going to focus on those huge revolutions that he outlines in the book, the cognitive revolution, the agricultural revolution, and then, of course, the scientific revolution. And we'll also dig into how we went from these scattered tribes to like a single global civilization. And then, the whole impact of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. All right, are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with this whole cognitive revolution. It's where things start to get really, really interesting.
It really is where things take off. The
Yeah.
cognitive revolution happened somewhere between 70,000 and 30,000 years ago.
Hmm.
And most people think of it as like humanity's giant leap forward. It's the moment when Homo sapiens, us, we really broke away from the pack and started our climb to the top.
And it wasn't like a physical change, right? It's not like we suddenly got these huge muscles or razor sharp teeth or something. It was way deeper than that. It was like a rewiring of our brains. You know what I mean?
Ah,
This revolution, it sparked some massive changes in how we think, how we use our imaginations, how we understand the world around us. It was like an upgrade, a real evolutionary jump in our cognitive abilities.
you got it. And like the foundation of this whole revolution, according to Harari, it was this new kind of language that we developed. It wasn't just like grunts and signals to warn each other about danger or where to find food like what other animals do. Human language became something totally different, something way more complex and powerful.
It's like we unlocked this superpower, right? This ability to imagine. We could remember the past, sure. But now we could also picture the future, tell stories, create all these ideas and concepts that weren't actually real. Not in a physical sense. It wasn't just about sharing like basic information. It was about creating these stories and sharing them with each other.
And here's the really mind-blowing part. Those stories, those shared fictions, they became the foundation for humans to cooperate on a massive scale. It's our ability to imagine things that don't exist, things like gods, nations, companies, laws. We all believe in these things, even though
Yeah.
you can't like see them or touch them. And those shared beliefs, they act like this glue, this invisible force that brings people together. And it allowed us to build these huge, complex societies. Think about it. You take a beehive or a pack of wolves, their size is limited. It's based on instinct and family ties. But humans, we're different. We've got these stories, these shared beliefs, and that lets us cooperate with complete strangers, people we've never even met. It's like this secret weapon for building something bigger than ourselves.
Wow. That really puts it into perspective. I mean, that's the difference between a small family group, living in a cave, and building a whole country. Millions of people working together under one flag, using the same money, following the same laws. And all because of this ability to share stories and ideas and this new way of thinking, this cognitive flexibility. It also really changed how we organized ourselves and the tools we used.
Exactly. With language, we could suddenly communicate so much more. Complex ideas, plans, strategies. It's like we went from dial-up to broadband. And our social structures, they had to adapt. They became more intricate, more sophisticated. And then boom, we see this explosion of tools and technology. Imagine early humans planning these big hunts, dividing up tasks, passing down this knowledge to their kids. It's a huge advantage for survival.
And this edge, this ability to think and communicate and cooperate, that probably explains why we outcompeted other humans, right? Like the Neanderthals. I mean, they were stronger physically, but maybe they couldn't organize themselves as well. Maybe their communication wasn't as advanced, so they couldn't work together on the same scale as Homo sapiens.
That's one of the main theories out there, and it makes a lot of sense. Neanderthals, they lived in smaller groups, kind of isolated. So when things got tough, resources got scarce, competition heated up, the larger Homo sapiens groups, they had the advantage. They could work together, they were more adaptable, and that probably played a big part in why we're here, and the Neanderthals aren't.
So the cognitive revolution, it's like we finally broke free from just surviving. We weren't just focused on food and shelter. We could think about bigger things, abstract ideas. We could invent new things. And most importantly, we could change our environment. It's the spark that ignited everything. Civilization, technology, these complex societies we live in today.
It's like the Big Bang of human history. And then, well, naturally, we get to the next major upheaval, the agricultural revolution. It all started about 10,000 years ago. And this is when things really changed. Humans, we went from roaming around, hunting and gathering, to settling down and farming.
It's like a total change in lifestyle. For the first time, humans, we started really messing with our environment. I mean, really manipulating it to get food, growing crops, raising animals. And this had huge implications, right? It meant a stable food supply. We didn't have to constantly be on the move looking for our next meal.
It was a game changer. Think about it. You can reliably grow food in one place. What happens? People stop moving around so much. And that's how we got permanent settlements, villages, towns, eventually cities. And with all that food, we started having surpluses, more food than we needed just to survive.
And those surpluses, they were key, weren't they? People didn't have to spend all day hunting or gathering. They had time to specialize, to develop new skills. So you get people who are really good at making tools, building houses. It's the foundation for a more complex society. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses, was it? There were some downsides that came with this shift.
Yeah, you're right. Agriculture had its advantages, sure. But it wasn't all easy. Hunter-gatherers, they ate all kinds of different foods, and they were way more active. When we shifted to agriculture, our diets became less diverse. We started relying on just a few main crops: wheat, barley, rice. And that could lead to, well, problems. People weren't getting all the nutrients they needed. Plus, you got all these people living close together, plus the animals. It was a perfect breeding ground for diseases.
Which brings us to one of Harari's most, let's say, interesting arguments. He calls the agricultural revolution, get this, history's biggest fraud. It sounds crazy, right? I mean, we think of agriculture as this huge step forward, the basis for civilization.
It is a provocative idea, right? But Harari makes you think. He's saying that maybe agriculture didn't make life easier or better. Maybe it actually trapped us, in some ways. Think about it. The farmers, they were tied to the land, constantly working, worrying about the weather, the crops. It was a hard life. And maybe, just maybe, the hunter-gatherers, they had more freedom, more time to relax.
And it changed society in a big way, right? Before, in those hunter-gatherer groups, everyone was pretty equal. Everybody contributed, everybody shared. But with agriculture, suddenly you have land ownership, and that creates all these new hierarchies, differences in wealth, and of course, conflict over resources.
Exactly. Now land becomes this valuable thing. You have people who own it, people who work on it, social classes emerge. And Harari, he paints this picture of the farmer's life. Back-breaking labor, constant struggle against nature. It's a stark contrast to the hunter-gatherer, who maybe have more free time, more variety in their lives.
Yeah.
So yeah, agriculture, it gave us the surplus to build civilizations, but it came at a price.
It seems like every step forward comes with its own set of challenges. Now, after all these big changes, the way we think and the way we get our food, the next chapter is about how all these different human groups started interacting more and more. And eventually, they sort of became one big global society. How did that happen on such a huge scale?
That's the next big puzzle piece, isn't it? How did all these scattered groups come together? Well, Harari, he points to three big unifying forces: money, empires, and religion. These were the things that brought people together, even if they came from totally different cultures and backgrounds.
Okay, let's break those down. Money. It seems so simple, but how did it become such a powerful force?
What's interesting is how money managed to work across all these different cultures. It didn't matter what language you spoke, where you came from. Money was this universal language of value. It's all based on trust. You trust that this little piece of paper, or this coin, or even this digital currency is worth something. And that allowed people to trade, to do business with each other, even if they didn't share anything else in common. It was a huge step forward from the old barter system.
So it created these connections, right? It brought people together based on this shared idea of value. What about empires? How did they contribute to unifying everybody?
Well, empires, they were all about expanding, right? Conquering new lands, bringing different people under their control. And in doing that, they created this, well, Unity. You have different groups living under the same laws, paying the same taxes. Think of the Roman Empire, right? They ruled over a huge, diverse territory. And they brought with them this sense of order, of belonging to something bigger.
So even though empires were often built through, well, let's be honest, violence and oppression, they also created this kind of unintended consequence. They brought people together under a single system. And then you have religion, shared beliefs, a sense of the sacred. How did that factor into everything?
Religion, it was a powerful force. It gave people this emotional connection. It didn't matter if they were from different places, spoke different languages, if they shared the same beliefs, the same stories about the world, they suddenly had something in common. It created a sense of community, a sense of purpose.
So these three things, money, empires, religion, they set the stage for something even bigger. Global trade and the rise of, you guessed it, capitalism.
Exactly. Money made it possible to trade on a global scale. Empires provided stability, safe passage for goods and traders. And religion, well, sometimes it helped build trust between people from different cultures. All of these things, they came together and boom, we get these huge trade networks spanning continents. And that's the perfect environment for capitalism to take root and flourish. Of course, we can't ignore the role of colonialism in all of this. European powers going out, conquering new lands, exploiting resources, opening up new markets. It was a brutal chapter, but it definitely accelerated this whole globalization process.
And with all this interaction, people traveling and trading all over the world, you also get a huge exchange of ideas, of cultures, technologies.
Absolutely. It's like a giant melting pot. Think about the Silk Road, one of the most famous trade routes in history. It wasn't just about goods. It was about ideas, philosophies, religions, all flowing between East and West. And when you have this kind of exchange, well, things start to change. People learn from each other. They adopt new ideas, adapt technologies. Innovation takes off.
And capitalism, with its focus on profit and investment, it really kicks everything into overdrive.
Right. You reinvest your profits, you make more money, you invest again, and the cycle continues. It's a powerful engine for economic growth. And with global trade expanding like crazy, well, the impact on human societies, it's been huge. Okay, ready for another big shift?
Right on.
Okay, let's talk about the scientific revolution. This one really changes how we see ourselves and our place in the universe.
Yeah, the scientific revolution. It all starts kicking off around the 16th century in Europe, and it's a total game changer. What's really radical about this period is the willingness to admit, we don't know everything. That's a big deal. I mean, before, most people got their knowledge from religion, tradition, ancient texts. This new way of thinking, it must have challenged everything.
It was a huge upheaval, like a mental earthquake. Science, it offered this new way of figuring things out. It's based on observation, experimentation, testing ideas. It's not about just believing what someone tells you or what some old book says. It's about looking at the world, asking questions, and then testing your ideas to see if they hold up.
And these scientific discoveries, they weren't just some abstract ideas. They had a real impact on the world, didn't they? Especially when they got mixed up with technology and capitalism. It created this powerful feedback loop.
It did. It's like science provided the blueprints, and then technology and capitalism, they took those blueprints and ran with them. New discoveries led to new inventions, new ways of doing things, and that fueled the growth of industry and, well, the whole capitalist system.
Yeah.
A perfect example is the Industrial Revolution. It was all about scientific breakthroughs leading to these new machines that transformed everything.
And exploration, discovering new lands, new continents. It starts out as this kind of adventure, this thirst for knowledge. But it gets a big boost from capitalism, right? I mean,
Right.
new lands mean new resources, new markets.
That's a thing about exploration and capitalism. They feed off each other. Explorers set out to find new things, and they often find, well, valuable resources. And that fuels the capitalist engine. It's this cycle of discovery and profit.
And the scientific revolution, it totally changed our view of the universe. Think about guys like Copernicus, Galileo, Newton. They blew everyone's minds. They said, hey, guess what? The Earth is not the center of everything. It was a complete shift from a geocentric worldview to a heliocentric one. Suddenly, we're just another planet revolving around the sun.
It's a huge shift in perspective, right? We weren't special anymore, at least not in that way. And it wasn't just astronomy. Think about physics, biology, chemistry. All these fields, they started uncovering the rules of nature, the laws that govern how everything works. And those discoveries, they challenged the old ways of thinking, the idea that everything was controlled by God or spirits or whatever.
And by understanding those laws, we learned how to, well, control nature in a way. Think about medicine.
Yeah.
We started understanding the causes of diseases, not just saying it's God's punishment or whatever. And that led to treatments, cures, and our life expectancy, it just exploded.
Exactly. We figured out how things work at a deeper level, and
Yeah.
with that knowledge, we can start fixing things, improving things. And medicine's a perfect example. We went from praying for a miracle to actually understanding how the body works and how to fight disease.
And we can't forget about some of those massive breakthroughs, like Newton figuring out gravity and the laws of motion. It's the foundation for physics, engineering. It's how we build bridges, skyscrapers, airplanes. And then there's Darwin and evolution. It totally revolutionized biology.
Yeah, those were huge.
Yeah.
Newton, he laid the groundwork for so much of modern science and technology. And Darwin, he showed us how all life is connected, how it changes over time. It was controversial, sure. I mean, it went against a lot of religious beliefs,
Hmm.
but it's the cornerstone of modern biology.
And science wasn't just happening in a vacuum. It started influencing politics, economics, especially when it came to military technology and industrial production.
Right. Countries that invested in science and technology, they had a clear advantage. They could build better weapons, produce more goods. It reshaped the balance of power in a big way.
Now, Harari, he has this interesting idea. He says that science has become kind of a new religion. It sounds strange, but what do you think he means by that?
It's one of those ideas that makes you go, that's interesting. He's saying that science, it's like a belief system in its own way. It's about searching for truth, for knowledge. And it has its own rituals, its own authorities, like, universities, scientists with fancy degrees. People trust them the way they used to trust priests or religious leaders.
So it's like a new way of understanding the world, a new way of finding meaning. It's not about worshiping gods or spirits. It's about believing in the power of reason, of observation, of the scientific method. And it promises progress, right? This idea that we can always learn more, discover more, make things better.
Yeah, it's like this optimistic outlook. It's about using our knowledge to improve our lives, to solve problems. It's a kind of faith, but in human ingenuity, in our ability to understand and control the world. Okay, ready to dive into something a little less uplifting?
Fire away.
Okay, let's talk about capitalism. And its trusty sidekick, consumerism. These forces, they've shaped the world we live in today.
Yeah, capitalism. It's more than just an economic system, right? It's like this giant force that's woven into everything, how we work, how we live, what we value. It's about private companies controlling most of the stuff, the production, the distribution of goods, and it's all driven by this one big goal: profit.
Exactly. Capitalism, it's about making money.
Hmm.
And to make more money, you need growth, constant growth. So the focus shifts from just surviving to accumulating more and more. It's not just about meeting our basic needs anymore. It's about wanting more, getting more, always striving for more.
And this constant need for growth, it really pushes things forward, doesn't it? I mean, companies, they have to compete, they have to innovate, come up with new products, new ways of doing things, and that drive to be better, to be faster, to make more money, it fuels a lot of the progress we see.
It's the engine that drives the whole system.
Yeah.
And at the heart of it all is this basic principle, supply and demand. People
Yeah.
want stuff, companies make stuff. And the whole thing is fueled by desire, by this need to have the latest gadget, the newest clothes, the biggest house.
And that brings us to consumerism, right? It's like the other side of the coin. If capitalism is about making money, consumerism is about spending it. It's about buying all that stuff that companies are churning out.
Exactly. In consumerism, it's not just about buying what you need. It's about being convinced that you need things you don't actually need. It's about this constant feeling of wanting more, of never being satisfied. Think about how often we upgrade our phones, our computers, our cars. It's a cycle that never ends.
And it's changed how we think about happiness, hasn't it? We're told that happiness is about having stuff. The more you have, the happier you are. But is that really true? I mean, studies show that beyond a certain point, having more stuff doesn't really make you happier.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, happiness. Harari points out that in a consumerist society, we're constantly bombarded with these messages that link happiness to material possessions. Buy this car, wear these clothes, and you'll be happy. But it's a trap. Real happiness, it comes from within, from our relationships, from finding meaning in our lives. It's not about stuff.
And Harari says that this whole system, capitalism, consumerism, it's unsustainable. We're living on a finite planet. We can't just keep consuming more and more forever. There are limits.
He's definitely sounding the alarm.
Yeah.
He's saying that this pursuit of infinite growth, it's going to crash and burn eventually. We're depleting resources, polluting the environment. It's not going to work in the long run.
It really makes you think about what's truly important, what really matters in life. It's a good reminder to step back and reevaluate our priorities. Okay, ready to shift gears again?
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about the Industrial Revolution, another one of those massive shifts that changed everything.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution, it all started in 18th century Britain.
Uh-huh.
And it's basically this huge shift from making things by hand to making them with machines. It's the birth of the factory of mass production.
We see all these new inventions popping up. The steam engine, these giant textile mills, coal mines. It's a new era of technology. And it changed how people worked, where they lived. It led to mass production, right? Suddenly, you can make huge quantities of stuff cheaply and quickly.
It's a whole new world. And with factories springing up, people started moving to cities. It's the beginning of urbanization. Millions of people leaving rural areas to find jobs in these new industrial centers.
And work itself, it changed, didn't it? Before, people were mostly farmers, craftsmen. They worked with their hands. They had more control over their time. But in a factory, it's all about efficiency, about following orders, working on a schedule.
It's a whole different way of life. And in some ways, it's kind of alienating, right?
Yeah.
People become just cogs in this giant machine. They don't see the whole process, the final product. It's not as satisfying.
And all this production, it required huge amounts of resources, right? We started digging up coal, oil, all kinds of minerals. And that had a big impact on the environment.
It's the downside of progress, isn't it? To fuel these factories, to power these machines, we started burning fossil fuels on a massive scale. And that led to pollution, to climate change. It's a problem that we're still grappling with today.
And we're not just talking about pollution. The Industrial Revolution, it reshaped our entire environment. Cities grew, forests were cut down, roads and railways were built. We transformed the landscape in a big way, and not always for the better.
It's like we built this whole world on top of the natural world, a world of concrete and steel and machines. And in doing so, maybe we lost something. Our connection to nature, our sense of place.
It's a thought-provoking idea. We've become so reliant on technology, on manipulating our environment, that we've forgotten how to live in harmony with it. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. But let's not forget the future. What does Harari have to say about what's next for Homo sapiens?
The future. This is where things get really interesting and a little scary. Harari asks this big question. Will Homo sapiens as we know it even exist in the future? Or will we evolve into something new, something completely different?
It's mind-blowing to think about it, right? With all these advancements in biotechnology, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, we're on the verge of being able to design our own evolution. We're not just passively evolving anymore, we're taking control.
Exactly. We're becoming like our own creators.
Yeah.
And Harari talks about the possibility of Homo sapiens becoming something else. Maybe through genetic engineering, maybe through merging with machines. Think cyborgs, part human, part machine.
It's like something out of science fiction, but it's becoming more and more realistic. I mean, we're already seeing gene editing, artificial limbs, brain-computer interfaces. Who knows what's next?
It's hard to even imagine. And it raises all sorts of ethical questions, like what happens if these technologies are only available to the rich? Will we create a new kind of inequality, a genetic divide?
And then there's AI. Artificial intelligence. It's getting more and more powerful, more and more sophisticated. What happens when it surpasses human intelligence? Who's in control then?
Big questions.
Yeah.
Right? And Harari doesn't shy away from them. He's saying that we're at a crossroads. The choices we make now will determine the future of our species. Do we embrace these technologies and risk losing our humanity? Or do we reject them and risk being left behind?
It's a lot to think about. And it's not just about technology. Harari also digs into these deeper philosophical questions about happiness, purpose, meaning. What's it all about? Are we any happier now than we were back in the Stone Age?
Right. We've made all this progress. We have all this stuff. But are we truly happy? Harari argues that maybe we're not. Maybe we've lost something along the way.
It's interesting, isn't it? You think about those hunter-gatherers. They lived simple lives. No stress about work, bills, social media. Maybe they were content in a way that we're not.
Harari points out that we have all these high expectations. We're constantly bombarded with images of success, of happiness. And that makes us feel inadequate, like we're always striving for something we don't have. It's like a treadmill. You keep running and running, but you never really get anywhere.
And we've lost a lot of those old stories, those myths and religions that gave people a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in the universe. Now we're kind of on our own trying to figure it all out.
It's the existential dilemma of modern life. We've gained so much knowledge, but maybe we've lost some wisdom.
And Harari says that this whole idea of happiness, the way we define it today, it's kind of messed up. We think happiness is about having things, achieving things, but it's more about our inner state, our mindset, our
Right.
relationships.
It's about contentment, about finding peace within ourselves. It's not about the next purchase, the next promotion. It's about something deeper.
So what's the takeaway here? What are we supposed to do with all this information, all these insights?
Well, I think Harari is challenging us to think differently,
Hmm.
to question our assumptions about progress, about happiness, but what it means to be human. He's asking us to be mindful of the choices we make, both individually and as a society.
So, to wrap things up, we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the cognitive revolution, the agricultural revolution, the unification of humanity, the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution. It's been quite a journey.
And the point is, it's all connected. Biology, culture, technology, economics, it all interacts in complex ways to shape who we are and where we're going.
And while we've made incredible progress, we've also created some serious challenges. Inequality, environmental damage, the potential for technology to get out of control.
It's a mixed bag, right? And it's up to us to decide what kind of future we want to create.
Well, that's a lot to chew on, and I think that's a good place to leave it for today. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure. It's been fascinating.
And to all our listeners out there, keep those brains buzzing. Think about the big questions, the big challenges, and remember, the future is not set in stone. We have the power to shape it. Until next time, stay curious.